more floors than the Empire State Building. 40 years. Not one guest has ever slept a single night in any of them. $500 million spent. A revolving restaurant at the top that has never revolved for a paying customer. 3,000 rooms that have never had a bed made up for anyone. At night, the building lights up in blue and red, flashing propaganda across the entire skyline of Pyongyang, visible for miles. Behind those lights, most of the structure is still bare concrete, exactly the way it was left in 1992. They call it the Hotel of Doom. Seoul, 1986. South Korea is getting ready to host the Summer Olympics, remaking itself into a modern capitalist democracy in full view of the entire world. A South Korean company has just built something the North can't ignore, the tallest hotel on the planet in Singapore. For North Korea, that's not just a hotel. That's a scoreboard. Kim Il-sung, the country's founding leader, decides Pyongyang needs an answer. Something taller. Something that steals the record back before the world even finishes watching Seoul's Olympics. The answer is the Ryugyong Hotel. Ryugyong, an old name for Pyongyang, meaning capital of willows. Planned at 105 floors. Planned to open in 1989, in time for a socialist answer to the Olympics called the World Festival of Youth and Students. Construction begins in 1987. For a country that had never built anything close to this scale, the ambition alone is staggering. 3 sloped wings, each nearly the length of a football field, meeting at a single point 330 meters above the ground. Ambition and capability are two very different things. That gap is about to swallow this project whole. Construction moves fast for a while. Concrete rises floor by floor, the 3-sided pyramid taking shape over Pyongyang faster than almost anyone expected. Underneath that speed, something is going wrong. Engineers working on the elevator shafts can't get them properly aligned. The concrete itself starts showing problems, masonry cracking in places it shouldn't. The materials being used, sourced from a country isolated from most of the world's construction industry, are, by multiple later accounts, simply substandard for a building of this size and height. The tower going up is not the tower that was designed on paper. Nobody stops construction. There's a deadline, and deadlines here matter more than warnings from engineers. So the building keeps climbing, floor by floor, cutting every corner it needs to cut to keep climbing. By 1992, the structure reaches its full planned height. On paper, that's a triumph. In reality, the country funding this building is falling apart. The Soviet Union, North Korea's single largest source of aid and trade, has just collapsed. With it goes the economic support that was quietly propping up the entire North Korean economy. Within a few years, that collapse spirals into a famine that will kill hundreds of thousands of people between 1994 and 1998. Against that backdrop, finishing a luxury hotel with a revolving restaurant becomes an embarrassment the government can't afford and can't finish and can't explain. Construction stops completely. The building stands there fully shaped, but hollow. No windows, no interior, no glass on the facade, just raw gray concrete, exposed to the weather, towering over a capital city that has nothing else remotely close to its size. For the next 16 years, that's exactly what it remains. A failed project, frozen mid-construction, slowly becoming a punchline. You'd think that would be the end of it. It isn't. Word about the building spreads far beyond North Korea's borders, and not in the way the government wanted. Western journalists start writing about the empty concrete pyramid dominating Pyongyang's skyline, and the nickname sticks almost instantly: the Hotel of Doom. In 2008, Esquire magazine runs a piece naming it the worst building in the history of mankind, calling it hideous, even by communist standards. A delegation from the European Union Chamber of Commerce inspects the structure and reaches a conclusion that should have ended this story right there. The building, in its current state, is beyond repair. The elevator shafts are crooked. Years of exposure to weather have taken a structure that was already questionable and made it worse. For a government obsessed with projecting strength, this building had become the opposite. A 330-meter monument to failure, visible from almost anywhere in the capital, impossible to hide, impossible to explain away. Then, in 2008, construction crews show up again. The deal behind it involves an Egyptian company, Orascom, that had agreed to build North Korea's first 3G mobile network in exchange for, among other things, a role in finally addressing this building. Work resumes on the exterior. By 2011, the outside of the tower finally gets its glass and metal cladding, transforming the raw concrete skeleton into something that, from a distance, actually looks like a finished skyscraper. 16 years naked, and now it finally has a skin. Finishing the outside of a 105-story building is not the same thing as finishing the inside of one. And the inside is where this project's real problems had always lived. In 2012, the German luxury hotel group Kempinski announces something that sounds, for the first time in over 20 years, like real progress. The hotel will partially open the following year with around 150 rooms ready on the upper floors. For a building that had become an international punchline, this is the closest it has ever come to redemption. Journalists start speculating about a real opening date. Tourists start asking their guides in Pyongyang whether they might actually get to stay there. It doesn't happen. The 2013 opening quietly gets pushed back, then pushed back again, then stops being discussed publicly at all. Reporters who ask are met with silence. No official explanation, no new date. Just the same building, now wearing a finished glass exterior over what industry experts increasingly suspect is still a deeply compromised interior. Here's what the glass cladding can't fix. According to engineers who've studied the project from the outside, the real challenge was retrofitting a building designed in the 1980s using 1980s specifications. For wiring, ventilation, and structural systems, a modern hotel actually needs to safely house thousands of guests. You can't wrap a beautiful shell around a core that was never built to hold what you're now asking it to hold. Some analysts have suggested that finishing the building properly and making it genuinely safe could cost North Korea up to $2 billion beyond what's already been spent. For context, that's roughly 4 times what's already gone into the project since 1987. So the country is left holding something almost impossible to solve either way. Finishing the interior properly might cost more than the entire project has cost so far. Admitting the building can never open means admitting, publicly, that one of the regime's most visible symbols was a mistake from the foundation up. Demolishing a 330-meter tower in the middle of a capital city, one that dominates the skyline and can be seen from almost every direction, is its own act of public humiliation, on a scale North Korea has never been willing to accept. So they choose a fourth option: leaving it there. Turning it into something else entirely. Sometime after the exterior cladding was completed, the government installed thousands of LED lights across the building's 3 sloped faces. At night, the entire 330-meter surface becomes one of the largest LED displays on the planet. Flags, patriotic slogans, animated light shows, visible from miles across Pyongyang. A building meant to be a symbol of hospitality and modern luxury turned into a symbol of something the regime is actually good at. Controlling exactly what its own capital city sees, every single night, whether it wants to or not. Every failed hotel project in the world eventually gets finished, sold, demolished, or quietly forgotten. This one did none of those things. For North Korea, the Ryugyong Hotel stopped being a hotel a long time ago. It became something the state could still use, even empty, even unfinished, even after everyone outside the country had already declared it a joke. An empty building, in most parts of the world, is a failure with nowhere left to hide. In Pyongyang, an empty building 330 meters tall, lit up every night with the state's own message, playing on repeat across an entire skyline, has turned that failure into the most visible structure the state controls. Recent reporting suggests North Korea has even looked into licensing gambling rights inside the building, offering to let an outside operator run a casino on the premises, in exchange for that operator finally finishing the interior. The government still can't finish the building itself. So now it's trying to convince someone else that finishing North Korea's most infamous unfinished project might somehow be worth their money. Today, the Ryugyong Hotel is still standing exactly where it stood for 4 decades. Fully clad on the outside, almost entirely hollow on the inside. Lit up every night with a light show nobody paying for a hotel room will ever see from the inside, because there is no inside experience to have. It's easy to look at a building like this and only see a punchline. The world's worst building, the hotel that never opened, a monument to a broken promise made in 1987. What it actually represents is harder to sit with. A government spending decades unable to admit that a mistake was ever made in the first place. Most failures eventually get torn down, or fixed, or forgotten. This one just gets a new coat of glass, a few thousand LED lights, and a new job to do, whether or not it was ever the job anyone originally intended. 40 years after the first concrete was poured, nobody has ever checked into the Hotel of Doom. Tearing it down means admitting it was a mistake. Finishing it means spending billions nobody's willing to spend. So it keeps standing exactly where it is, lit up, empty, and impossible to ignore. If you're into buildings with a life of their own, real engineering failures, and what happens when ambition outruns capability, this is your channel. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.